If you've been playing fighting games for some time, getting surprised becomes pretty difficult. Most games that are coming out generally fall into broad categories like a tag fighter, 2D, 3D, arena, anime, or platform fighter. You get the idea. Once you understand what category they fall into, you already get the gist of what to expect. These games will have some unique systems and mechanics, but generally there's nothing groundbreaking, nothing that you haven't seen before in some way. And that's not a bad thing. The gameplay of fighting games still has a lot of space to explore, but the current trends have settled because both players and developers have a decent idea of what works. For this reason, if fighting games are going to evolve, it probably won't happen through gameplay anytime soon. And that's why in this video we thought it would be interesting to look at a different vector of evolving fighting games. One that is perhaps a little more realistic. That vector being the FGC, specifically just the C part or community. So let's get into this. There are lots of different games and genres out there, but you never hear about them having some sort of unified group. People do bunch up around common interests, but it doesn't really coalesce into something more than that. Like, you can't really say there is an FPS community or an action game community. The closest it gets is probably MMOs, and while it has its own unique context, it's no coincidence that we can trace one similarity: the inherent social aspect of both of these genres. You had two people playing against each other at their arcades and becoming regulars that know each other. Even with home consoles, the best way to play was with a friend. The general cadence of releases for both sequels and new fighting games also encouraged players to get good at more than one fighting game. The events played a huge role as well. We have so many events where every game is welcome and anyone can enter. It's like everything aligned for fighting game players to build bonds and form a unified community around the entire genre. I have personally met some of my best friends and just plain great people by playing fighting games, but not through them. You always have to go to some other platform to actually connect with people, be it something like a forum, Twitter, or Discord. Fighting games don't really take advantage of the strong community that has built up around these games, though there have been some general improvements. The chief among them comes in the form of various lobby and hub systems. ArcSys games have been some of the first to try and do something like this. In BlazBlue, for example, instead of the general lobbies, you could take people to your literal digital in-game room that you can personally decorate. And in Guilty Gear Xrd, while customization was limited to your chubby little avatar, you also had private rooms that had a bouncing football, which led to more fun moments than it had any right to. There was a vocal sentiment against stuff like this when Strife came out, and yeah, it's not great when this is your only option. But overall, I think it's done more good than bad. And for the social aspect, I think it's great for the player to be represented within the game even when they're not in a match. Street Fighter 6 is currently the best at doing this. Not only because it does give you the option to do things however you want, but because they significantly expanded the character creation, customization, and the range of activities you can get up to. Does anyone actually use the DJ stand? It doesn't really matter. It's cool that it's there, it's fun. If you're chasing after points, people are always fighting over the glowing cabs. Want to do something more relaxing? There's Extreme Battle and Arcade Cabs. The latter is especially cool because there is a separate leaderboard if you want to go for it. Like, you can straight up launch SF6 to try and get the highest score in Legendary Wings or Captain Commando. That is so unbelievably cool to me. Oh, and of course you can watch all these weirdos and monsters fight each other in avatar battles. Capcom actually managed to create one of these 3D hubs and make it feel like a bit of a social hangout spot. Even if people do get incentives to visit here, it's obvious that they're getting a lot of use out of this. And you always see people chatting, complimenting each other, discussing the game, or plain talking shit, which can be a part of the charm. However, there is so much more that fighting games could be doing. So let's start with something more simple, something that you realistically can expect fighting games to do right now. We don't even have to leave the Battle Hub to find some examples. You know that huge screen they have in the middle? This goes for Tekken Hub 2, by the way. There are a bunch of seats in front of it, but how come it never shows anything interesting? You basically just see Street Fighter 6 ads within Street Fighter 6. There is so much more you could do. It would have been cool if these giant screens were used to broadcast tournaments, from huge worldwide events to something more local. Sure, you could always watch it in a browser, but there is some novelty to just seeing it within the game and organically coming together with other players to spectate and cheer for your favorite players. And even if they don't do this, it could still exist as some separate option in one of the menus. For example, Counter-Strike and Dota already do this thing where you can watch tournament sets or high-level matches just by using the in-game browser. Not only does it allow for a new way to connect with the competitive scene, but you also get an entirely unique perspective on the matches, since you're not limited by the broadcast camera. They even have a separate chat for spectators. Those same hubs could also put a bigger emphasis on the micro-communities found within them with more permanent leaderboards. Kind of like how some arcades might have a record of who achieved the highest win streak. It's a cool goal for competitive players to try and achieve, as it sort of immortalizes you within the hub unless someone can beat your score. Moving on to something more complex, how about some actual clubs? What we have right now in most games is a little more than a tag next to your name. Instead, these can be used to build actual micro-communities within the game that focus on different things. But for that to happen, their functionality needs to be expanded. For starters, scrap limits on how many people can join, especially when it allows only 1 or 200 people. After that, these groups should have an ability for members to discuss things. And not with just the chat room, but the ability to create more permanent topics of discussion. Like, if you have a group centered around learning a specific character, you want some sort of way to store and share that knowledge. Ideally, you could also announce community events and host tournaments within the game. Tekken 7 used to have something like that with player tournaments, but they sadly scrapped it. If you want something more perhaps practical, how about featuring community content within the game? It's not much of a hot take to say that fighting games have always been pretty bad at teaching players. But it's not just that. Learning how to play them in general can be more challenging and less intuitive than with some other games. That's where the FGC picked up the slack. You have people like Rufomonger doing roster breakdowns so that you can find a character that suits you. Brian F. and Diaphone exploring specific questions and doing character guides. Sajam explaining some of the fundamental fighting game concepts. In one way or another, most of us had to rely on guides from other people to get better at fighting games. Why not turn this into a mutually beneficial relationship? Imagine if the wealth of information that is scattered through wikis, Discord servers, forums, social media posts, and YouTube videos could be accessed from within the game. There are lots of different ways to implement this, but at this point the biggest issues we start running into are not development, but legality and cost. Even if you pay people and sign contracts, there is no guarantee that you won't run into issues later on. Maybe the content creator will do something terrible, or decide that they got ripped off and try to sue the company. Even if the chances are small, it's the sort of thing that big publishers are terrified of. For the same reason, moderation of content is a big concern. Nobody wants to see their game in the news because people are getting harassed or worse, with no repercussions. If you put people next to each other, especially in a competitive setting, bad things are bound to happen. Ensuring that everything is kept reasonably clean will require people who can build the systems for it, then test it, moderate it, and maintain it. Like, it would be cool if instead of Discord you could just have some forum within the game where you could call people to play. But because of the PR and bureaucracy involved, it's probably never going to happen. However, I do hope someone tries. Even something small scale, like more direct communication with your opponent, could be so fun. Yeah, there will be some shit talking, but think of fightcade matches where something like this is already happening. There is a culture of throwing the credits to sort of say, kudos, that was a great play you just pulled off. And when you run like half an hour set with someone, you usually get a nice chat afterwards. Because some matches end up connecting people in a way that only fighting games can. You know, people use Discord fighters disparagingly, but those low population games are where it's at if you want to find and join a community. Instead of this faceless mass that you find in ranked queue, it's a smaller group of people that tend to know each other and even build friendships. As a result, playing against them is so much better than fighting a stranger you know nothing about. Specifically, it eliminates a lot of the frustration and even aggression that tends to exist in the usual online matches. It would be amazing if some of this experience could be found and felt without leaving the game. Even if more social features could result in some bad experiences, I believe most of us are good, nice people who enjoy the genre and love to run a good set. As always, thank you for watching all the way to the end, and tell us how you feel about this. Do you see potential in more social features? What sort of implementations would you like to see? And what sort of experiences do you want to see more of? For now, have a good one, and we'll see you next time.